that I think that is the main thing, that when you just stop and go back and think of school during those days, it's the respect and the honor you seem to receive. And it was a two-way thing. They gave you honor, and you wanted to honor them. You wanted to give them what they were expecting from you. It was a trust. They were trusting their children to you, and they had a need for their children to be more than they were. And I tried to honor that.
All of our staff were people who were people-oriented, and they believed in the kids getting the very best and having the best opportunities possible that was available. And they insisted that their boys and girls study, do their homework, so to speak, and be prepared for the day's work as they entered the school.
Many of our schools were built because the church people came together and said, we need a school. We need a school for our children. And I think our Lumbee people were rooted and grounded, I think, in church and the spiritual aspirations, you know, to help us do better.
When I went to Magnolia, I found lots of children who moved around there. And we were in a wide area. We were down the 7th Street Road, Barker Timber. All those children came into Magnolia School. And they were lovely children. Their parents were so cooperative. They were interested in their child learning to read. I remember one day, my principal said, Mrs. Harris, go to the book room and get a certain child a book. His father wants him to have a toting book. That was a book for him to carry back and forth from school. And when those children would learn to read their first pre-primers, they would take them home and read them to their parents, and their parents were so well pleased with them.
In fact, the land which I'm on now was inherited from my grandfather. And that whole area, that's basically what it is. And the inherited people do not sell off their land. Seldom do they sell any land to outside people. It's just handed down from year to year. I think this is one of the reasons we are such a community that's very, very stable. And we've always been encouraged hard workers, dedicated to our profession, whatever it might be, farming, and basically was farming, corn, cotton, tobacco was our main source of income.
Well, the people that we knew and associated with were tenant farmers just like we were, for the most part. And a lot of our social life centered around the church and the school, of course, and a lot of visiting. You know, we didn't have TV and home entertainment then, and people would get out more and visit. I remember a lot of times on Sunday we would go home with someone, have lunch, and spend half the evening with them, and people come visit us, you know. And so it was home, school, well, church, and our parents. Now there was 10 in my family. I'm the oldest of 10, big family, and my daddy finished 8th grade. My mother finished 11th grade, but they always encouraged us to go to school, and I'm thankful for that.
And in order to make a living, they knew their children would have to stay on these farms and work even if school had started. And many times, even though school started in September, it would be late October when you'd finally get all the children in school. Of course, this was a disadvantage, but it also proved to be a good thing so far as the teacher is concerned. It increased our awareness that their individual needs. And when those children would come, if I had gone, let's say, 2 weeks in a typing lesson, I started with day one with the 2 or 3 who came at the end of these 2 weeks, because I knew you couldn't just put them there and say, catch up. They couldn't do that. So I learned to I learned to realize that we're going to have individual differences, and to the best of my ability, I wanted to meet that need so that at the end, each child could say that they had had a fair chance at getting what the other students had as far as knowledge.
And of course, we didn't go to Lumberton. We went to Magnolia, and then the bus coming along and taking us to the segregated school at Magnolia. But you know, I didn't think a lot about it then because that's just the way it was. Today, and also another thing that we would see. Now, we had to stay out of school to work the tenant farm. We had to stay out of school in the fall for like maybe 3 or 4 weeks to harvest the crop. In the spring, we had to stay out of school a few weeks in order to do spring planting. And so we missed quite a, and we were not the only ones. There was a lot of, I was in class with a lot of students that had to stay out of school, and that came first. Working the farm, harvesting, spring planting, and that kind of thing. That came first.
I'm going to share one story with you. I was an 8th grade teacher at this time. And by the way, back then, you know, we had a county school system, and then each one of the little towns around, for example, Red Springs, Maxton, and Lumberton, and Parkton, and Rowland, all had individual school systems. And opening a school, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but anyway, I was an 8th grade teacher. Someone in the community made mention that Red Springs school system had discarded a lot of their textbooks for students. And so at the garbage disposal center. So that after school, I went over there, and I was driving a little coupe, white 39 Ford. And I went there, and I got the back end of that vehicle filled with textbooks. And I put them in, I brought them home. And when I got to school the next day, I had enough of books in there. And I only looked primarily for books that related to my grade. And I got back to school, but I had enough of books to give every one of my students books.
Well, you needed books, and they make your order and they bring them in to you. There'd be used books, and there would be a name that you knew was not an Indian name. So where did it come from? Did it come from a white school? I doubt it came from a black school, because they were in the same boat we were in. Yes, that's we didn't. If we got some new books, there was a small number of books, and the rest of them were hand-me-downs.
Now, being able to go into the drugstore and get a soda, because they had a little corner over there, 4 or 5 chairs, 2 little tables, and when after school, the students would come and they would sit. They'd have a soda and maybe a sandwich. That wasn't for us. I tell them that, and I said, that's just the way it was. I grew up with it like that. My mother grew up with it like that, and I was taught that's the way it was. And I didn't question. I didn't have a reprobate mind. When you talk to the children now, they begin to say, I wouldn't. I said, no, listen how it was.
There was some prejudice, yeah. The principal was down there. He was as redneck as any redneck that I've ever ran into. But I had been around enough to know that even though I wasn't as white as he was, I was as smart as he was. And that gave me a good feeling. You know, I remember one time he walked in the lounge and he ought to known this, and I think he did. Got talking and said, "Stacy, you have a master's degree?" Well, the reason I went down there was because I had a master's degree. That was the job I had required a master's degree. But it was just hard for him to acknowledge and give me credit for having a master's degree.
We had no representation on the Board of Education. And eventually, you say, well, why? Well, they could run, but still, before the double voting was broken, you had the parents in these city units voting on the board members in the county, even though they did not send their children to school. And so there's a lawsuit that brought that about, which broke double voting, and then that allowed us to get, I think eventually we might have had one or two I think they were put on there by legislators. But it was that process, so we really had no voice at the table.
I asked the superintendent because I was curious as a 8th grade teacher. I wanted to know how the white school, Red Springs particular, how their teachers taught their students, if they taught basically like I did. And I asked the superintendent, could I go over there? And he told me, he gave me a very intelligent answer, I think. He says, in the first place, they don't want you there because it's predominantly white and you're all Indian. They don't want you there. So if I were you, I would not question, not even think about wanting to go over there. But it was curiosity that bothered me.
I don't think there was an awareness of being segregated because it was a way of life. This is the way it had always been, and they were happy. We were happy because we didn't know any other way of life, and because of the school being in their community. It was their school. This is my school. There's much pride taken in that fact. This is our school. And then the parents backing and having that same respect for school and education, they instill that just from the way just from their own lifestyle of pushing and encouraging and wanting them to be there, and their respect for the teachers. That's what we lost in becoming desegregated. Our identity, everybody lost. Magnolia held on to theirs for a long time. Then when Magnolia, in 1991, when Magnolia had to go to Lumberton High because our high school was closed. Orem had to go to Lumberton High. Littlefield had to go to Lumberton High. So where did Magnolia, Littlefield, and Orem go? They went to Lumberton High School. Lumberton held on to their identity.
I guess probably the best measuring stick that we had back then was the number of students that we had graduate each year versus the number of kindergarten enrollments. And that was it. And our kids were very successful. Our attendance was good and had very, very few dropouts. In fact, there was almost no dropouts whatsoever because we encouraged them to stay in school because this is your livelihood. You got to have an education. And without an education, it's going to be difficult for you to meet the world of that time and even today.
I'm not sure we have all that nurturing going on because there's so many other mandates that's placed upon the schools and the teachers and others that I don't think they have time to do that nurturing. And we were nurtured. And from that nurturing, we were able to, and the church nurtured us. My first speaking assignment when I was in the intermediate class at church, And I had to get up one Sunday to speak, and my knees were knocking and my hands were knocking. But at the same time, that first experience gave me confidence to be able to move on. And so, and as a result of that, over the years, I've been able to speak small groups, large groups without any difficulty.
It was something about her that she just focused on what not what I was achieving, but what she thought I could achieve. And in this school, she challenged. I don't know what she did to the other kids. I can't remember that, but I remember how she seemed to say, "This, I know you can do it. I know you can."
Well, the children were so nice. They had respect. And one thing about it, though, you've got to get these children to loving you before you can get anything across with them. So I decided I'd start visiting the homes. I knew some of the children wasn't as sweet and everything as others. When I started going to their homes, I found out in a few cases their mother was dead. They just had their father to look after them. And a man doesn't have that love that the mama's got.
The best of time, of course, was that the community thing, the identity, identifying this is mine, this is mine, this is ours, and the cooperation of the parent and the school and the students, and the honor that both gave each other. The parents gave to the teachers, and teachers gave to the parents in trying to allow them to know we're doing the very best that we can for your child.